Now, what's happening here, for anyone that might be listening outside of this godforsaken building, is that the government is seeking to spend yet more public money to prop up fossil fuels. Now, sadly, we're sensing a bit of a theme here with this government, who love to splash around taxpayer money to their big donors, who make those generous contributions and exact policy outcomes that suit their corporate bottom lines, and now exact yet more public support. So what we are seeking to do tonight is to disallow the government from giving yet more money to the fossil fuel sector. But it gets more laughable, because the vehicle through which the government is seeking to dish out yet more taxpayer money to their big corporate mates in the oil and gas sectors, they want the Australian Renewable Energy Agency to fund this new dirty energy. The clue's in the name, guys: Australian Renewable Energy Agency. But no, this government doesn't mind so much about renewable energy. It wants to allow the Renewable Energy Agency to instead fund what it calls low emissions technology, but when you look at the fine print, is carbon capture and storage, and hydrogen powered not by clean energy, which the Greens support, but powered by dirty energy. Yet more support for the fossil fuel sector. So this government wants to spend, it's already spent about $1 billion on trying to make carbon capture and storage a thing. Hasn't gotten anywhere yet. The private sector have been trying to make carbon capture and storage work somewhere for more than a decade. They haven't succeeded yet either. This mythical creature of carbon capture and storage has not yet been shown to work anywhere. It is a unicorn, it is a myth, and yet this government wants to spend precious taxpayer dollars and has the hide to want the Australian Renewable Energy Agency to dish out those dollars to big oil, to big gas, to big coal, to do this carbon capture and storage and dirty hydrogen. What an absolute affront to anyone that actually wants a safe climate and wants all those tens of thousands of jobs in renewable energy jobs and investment. No, the height of this government is just never ceases to amaze me. They are so desperate to give public money to their gas donors that they're even willing to break the law to do it. And that's why we are moving to disallow this instrument today, because the government want to hand over the money of the Australian people to their coal and gas donors through a renewable energy agency who, by legal definition, cannot fund coal or gas projects. Now, the Greens were in the room when this original legislation to set up ARENA was first discussed and negotiated back in 2011, and Martin Ferguson was the responsible minister at the time. That was before he left Parliament to become the chair of the gas industry lobby. And the Greens weren't going to give him an inch, so we made sure that the legislation was drafted tightly. So that's why the government are back here today, and that's why this regulation that they're seeking to put through, that we are seeking to disallow, is a textbook example of what's known as ultra vires, beyond power. They're trying to make a renewable energy agency set up by a Renewable Energy Act to invest in dirty energy. It's not going to fly. A regulation, as you know, the procedure nerds would know, can't operate on a subject matter that's beyond the scope of its parent act. You learn that in first-year law school, and I would think that people intuitively understand that the Renewable Energy Agency probably should just be funding renewable energy. Spoiler alert, this government wants it to do all of those dirty projects and fund the nonsense that is carbon capture and storage and dirty hydrogen. But sections 3 and 8 of ARENA's Act list the objects and the functions of ARENA, and, as I've said before, it's confined to supporting renewable energy technologies. Only in the Coalition's alternate reality can carbon capture and storage and hydrogen made from gas or coal be considered renewable. And this is why the regulation stretches the bounds of legality and, frankly, stretches the bounds of credulity. The government's own Scrutiny of Delegated Legislation Committee has said that this regulation appears beyond power. The Parliamentary Library can also not see any way in which this regulation is within power, and if this disallowance fails, this regulation will be taken to court, because you cannot fund dirty energy through a piece of legislation that limits your money to renewable energy. It's a pretty straightforward concept, and the lawyers think it will be a slam dunk. Barristers are briefed and the litigation is ready to go to strike down this regulation. So if our disallowance is not successful, and we all wait to see whether One Nation will once again vote with the government, as they so often do, if they do in fact once again do the government's bidding and facilitate this public money going to dirty energy rather than renewable energy, then, perhaps they will be held responsible for the needless legal costs of the government, who will seek to argue the indefensible in court. So this vote on the disallowance really determines whether further taxpayer money is going to be wasted on lawyers' bills. ARENA is an absolute success story. The Renewable Energy Agency has worked, and this is what happens when the Greens are in shared power. ARENA has driven down the cost of renewables, and in particular solar, in this country through their solar auctions. They've funded the research and the jobs for how Australia is going to succeed in this world where there is no place for coal or oil or gas. They've worked hand in glove with the Clean Energy Finance Corporation to drive investment in renewables and innovation that has led to emissions coming down despite the awful and non-existent policies of this government, who will do everything they can to boost for their fossil fuel donors. So perhaps the greatest example and the greatest indicator of ARENA's importance and success is the unrelenting attacks that this government keeps throwing at them. This government has cut the ARENA budget twice. First, with the help of Mr Clive Palmer, as he then was, and then, sadly, with the help of the Labor Party, who voted to cut ARENA's funding in half, to their eternal shame. We welcome that Labor appear to be standing firm on backing in the remit of the Renewable Energy Agency just to renewables. That's a very welcome stance by them. But it comes down to the fact that this government will just do everything it can to hand out public money to the fossil fuel sector.